Welcome everybody to the first CodamX talk of the decade. Sounds very impressive, you know. I can only say that once. Well, anyway, welcome all. Please remember to turn off your phone and put it on flight mode, because otherwise you might get some interference on the audio recording, and that's not very nice. So please really turn it off or put it on flight mode. And again, as always, it's being live streamed, so you can watch it back as well if you want. Just go to codam.nl/CodamX and you can find all the links there. If you have any questions, please wait with your questions until the end of the talk, and we'll come to you with a catch box with a microphone so you can ask your question then. Now, Wendell will introduce our speaker.
Yes, hi everyone. Our speaker of today is Carmen, and she is a senior Java consultant and developer with over 10 years of experience. She currently works for Backbase, and Backbase is a software company that helps banks like IBM integrate e-banking software like applications for customers. And today she will talk about what skills and things you need beyond coding. Please welcome Carmen.
Thank you very much. So my name is Carmen Podar. I'm from Romania originally, and I moved here 2 years ago. And I work as a Java developer for 13 years. So it's quite some time. And I forgot to take this. And today I'm going to try to tell you part of my story. And I hope this will be relevant for you. And I will talk about how it was for me in certain periods of my career. And in the end, I'm going to tell you about some lessons learned that I realized, some of them I realized only later in my career that were really important. And the fact that I went to the internship that I went and it was organized the way it was really shaped my career. And this, I hope you will find relevant for you. Also, in the end, I will give you some books, which are, again, old books, but I still think they are relevant for everyone in the IT industry. Beginning. Who remembers these phones? Does anyone of you? Yay! So this was back in 2006. These were how phones looked like. Not really smartphones, and we were talking, at least if you had a colorful one. So a color one was, oh my God, you were really cool back then. So I was in the last year of university in 2006. And I went to computer science university. I went to that university because I was passionate about mathematics. I was never passionate about computers. I never played on computers. I still don't. I tried with everything, but no, it's not for me. But I loved math, and programming came as a way of solving the mathematical problems, and it was really cool. And I could see the utility of the software that I was writing. So this is why I chose to go to computer science. How it was approached, we started from everything: assembly, functional programming, C, C++. I think we did some Java and C#, but everything then was really theoretical. So I have to admit that sometimes I cheated on the projects. So I was not the kind to go home and do the projects. If someone would have done it for me, I was glad to take it. So I was in the last year, and the only certainty for me at that point was the fact that I have to find a job. So what should I do? Back then, there were not very... IT was not this popular, because now I think you are in different times, and there are so many IT companies. So back then, my best friend was already in an internship, .NET. So for me, it didn't matter, .NET, whatever. So she told me, okay, send a CV to this guy, and maybe you will get accepted in the same team as I do. So really cool, right? I sent the CV, and I received a reply saying that, I'm sorry, there are no more openings for .NET. But in February, Java internship will start, and you can try to apply for that. So why not? Java.net, for me at that point, it was the same. So I sent my CV, and I went to an interview, the first interview of my life. I still remember the room and how the two people that I had the interview with and how they were sitting. I passed the interview, and I got accepted in an internship of 12 people. We started with the basics of Java. There is a book still now, Thinking in Java is called. We started with that. We went through every chapter of it, and we had to do all the exercises. It's a book like this, so it took us, I think, 2.5 months. It was at least 8 hours a day, but for me it was from 8 to 12, staying in the company, and then going home and studying further. After we finished the book, we were split in teams, and every team got a mini project. And also we got 2 mentors, which were developers from the company. We split the tasks for the projects, and whenever we finish one, we just send the code. Back then there was CVS, I think. And then we received feedback, like a code review from the developers. And again, to realize how old it was in an Excel file that we received on the email. So this was my internship. It was hard. There were 3 months of intense work, but there were 2 things at the end. First of all, I was offered the job as a junior Java developer in the company. And the second one, I loved programming. So that was the good thing for me. Also, one of the interesting things was the fact that in that company, there were knowledge transfer sessions. Every 2 weeks, all the developers were gathering in a room like this. And based on volunteering, someone presented the subject. One of the first one was about aspect-oriented programming. I still remember I read about it before. I didn't understand anything. So I understood the concept, I could say the buzzword, but when it comes to what it meant, what it's used, nothing. Then I went to this meeting, and my colleagues were debating, of course they are more senior, they were debating, saying how it should be used, how they used it, what's the disadvantages, the advantages, everything. I felt dummy, because I could kind of understand what they are saying, but I realized I didn't understand anything until that moment. So I went back to my desk, I started Googling, and I did a tutorial on aspect-oriented programming, and I understood it. My mind, and I know now, my mind works like this. So if I read something, if I don't find the practical meaning of it and where to use it, I forget it. For example, I had some time in one of the companies, and I tried to learn Scala. Scala, it's really cool functional programming. This was like 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, I did it, but after 1 month, I got bored. And I can say now, if you give me Scala, I don't think I will remember anything, because I didn't have any projects to work on. So the first project, it was, again, this was 2007. I finished my internship. We did before that an internal project, and then my boss came to me and said, okay, we will give you a cool project. You can go on a cool project, but there is a catch to it. And I said, okay, what's the catch? The catch is that you have to work on client premises for a year. That meant moving to London. That was my second time getting out of the country, so that was also a challenge. So, of course, I said yes. Why not? That was a project from scratch, which back then was also strange. Back then in Romania, the majority of the project were in outsourcing. And they did outsourcing, how I call it, I have to register this, pure outsourcing. Pure outsourcing, from my perspective, means you get the task, which is defined in more technical terms than business terms. You have to execute the task, like, okay, write a class or a method that does this, and you send it back. But you don't know the context, you don't know the final usage of that. You don't know, you just send it, and that's your idea. That was back then. But I was lucky. again. And the project was from scratch, and this was Agile, which in 2007, that was really new. So how it was approached, okay, we had to work with Spring Framework, which was, again, really cool back then. It still is, but back then it was new. So I was given a book. It's called Spring in Action. It defines everything from the principles on which the framework is used, on the syntax and everything. So I was given that book. Then when it came to Agile, all of us were new in that. So the company just brought in some trainers, and they explained, first of all, what that is. And then at every retrospective, we got the coach. So besides the fact that I was a junior and the other two, we were 4 developers in the team, Java developers. 2 of them were, I think, 5 to 6 years older than me, and the other one was an architect from the UK in his 50s. One thing that was hard for me was to learn that it's okay to take any task and ask about it, and decide afterwards if I want to take it, if I can take it. But the idea was everyone was there for me to grow, and of course we had to write code. But in the end, yeah, I had a choice. Also, one thing that got me out of my comfort zone was the fact that during our retrospectives, we had to say what went well and what can be improved. That was also hard, coming from a way where, okay, there is a professor, he decides what you have to do, you have to deliver, you don't have any opinions. So, yeah, that was it. So this was my first project. The project. It's 2014. I moved to a company where that was doing only Microsoft. And they decided they got the biggest retailer in Europe as a client, and they were doing Java. So they started a Java department. I was one of the first developers. I was sent to Germany on client premises for 3 months. And I was put on their core software, which is the goods management system. It's a system that is installed in all their stores, which are more than 1,000 in Europe. But it was really old. It's 25 years old. And the UI is written in a framework. If you search that on Google, you won't find almost anything. So that old. But the backend was in Java. So this was what we had to do. It was not very challenging from a technical perspective, but from my side, it was the biggest project I worked on. So I wanted to understand, okay, if this software doesn't work, the company can't work, because it handles all the sales, the stocks, everything that you do in the store, it's in that software. So I learned the software and learned how it was. And after that, even I didn't have many tasks. So I tried to suggest, okay, let's do some refactorings, let's do that and that. But being a highly bureaucratic company, and they were kind of afraid to touch the system because it was too old. And I told you, it was used every time, all the time, everywhere in the store. So I went back to my company. I was already back in Romania, and I said, okay, I need to do something because I'm bored. So I started doing trainings. I started doing interviews. I ended up being Agile coach for other teams. So one day, one of the architects from Germany, from the other teams, came to me and said, okay, Carmen, I have an idea. And I said, okay. Do you know you know the details, the business details of the goods management system? And I'm working on a project which we want to implement automatic stock replenishment. What does that mean? You have an automatic way of checking the stocks, the sales, and whenever you have a certain condition to be met, to automatically order from the supplier the goods. But for this, you need the stocks and the sales. And these were in the goods management system that I was working on. But being so old, they didn't dare to touch that. So how they got the things, they were exporting data, and the data that was used was at least 48 hours old. You can't really do a live automatic calculation of the stocks, right? It's not, you can't. So he said, okay, I have an idea. We will start a project from scratch. We will collect the data from all 1,000 stores worldwide, store it centrally, and then expose it to the other projects to use. That was what? I'm still in the company where they are afraid to refactor stuff. So how does it work? And he said, it doesn't matter. I convinced the management to give us budget for a proof of concept of 6 months. If we manage to get the stocks and the prices from Poland, because that was the first country that actually dared to use our product, then we are in. And I was, okay, I'm in, of course. So it was me and another developer. We did the proof of concept, and because it worked, it started growing as a project. So we ended up, okay, hiring more people, having more features. So this was the project. It was the coolest project. I think it still is. When I left, it still was, that everyone wanted to work on because it was different frameworks, all the coolest things to do. And it's still pretty cool to know that, okay, if you go to the shop, you change the way they were doing software in the company. And one part, I did management because I told you, I was bored, so I started doing all this stuff. So in the end, because I was involved in everything, from interviews to trainings, and then building a Java community. Why I did this was because I had the boss who I said, okay, my idea is that I want to work in a company that has professional developers that besides coding, they care about the client and they care about what they are doing. So I want to have a company like that. I said, okay, we are going to do that. So we started doing that, and in the meantime, because the company was growing really fast, they hired some trainers for soft skills because there were a lot of people going into management, but didn't have much knowledge of it. So we went to a lot of soft skill trainings. And in the end, I quitted before coming here. No, not before. It was because in 1 year, my boss was moved to another position, and I had 4 different bosses. So the last one came to me and put all the people in the department in an Excel, telling me, okay, this is the rate that they get from the client, this is their salary, and we need this to be a certain ratio. And I was, oh my God, I just invested almost 3 years in something, and this comes to an Excel. So it ended up badly at that point. It was, let's say, a mistake from my side. So I had a meeting with him, and we were in contradiction. And in the end, he said, okay, you are not being proactive. You are not doing your job well. And he was in the company for 2 months. I was there for 3 years. And I went home. I didn't sleep at all weekend. But it didn't felt right. I couldn't work. It was against my idea of having professional people there and just writing software, good software. So I quitted it was called business area manager of the commerce department. I quitted by sending an email to all the department. It felt right, I can say that. Now, if you ask me, I would say, okay, maybe a weekend wasn't enough for what I did. But still, I did it, and that was it. I live with my mistakes, what can I say? But I learned a lot. After that, I went to my coach. I had the coach. Then I went also to a therapist to talk about, okay, what I did and how that influenced my ideas. So, yeah. But after that, I didn't quit the company. I just quitted that role. Because one of the things that I still think I did very well was the fact that I continued doing the technical work. First of all, I did technical interviews. And technical interviews, for me, they were challenging. Because there were a lot of things, okay, I can't go to an interview and ask questions that I don't know the answers to. Or even usually we were two technical interviewers. So if my colleague asks a question and I don't know the answer, that's kind of, how can I go there and be like that? So it was a challenge for me to keep up to date with everything. And because of that, I was still coding. So at least 20% of my time I was coding on the project. So these were parts of my story, because in 13 years we have a lot. But I think I learned some lessons, and I tried to get 4 that I think are relevant for you. First of all, in every thing that I did, I was taught to approach things by, okay, what do I do? Internship, you have the book. Agile, you have the training. Spring, read the book. Management, go to trainings. So for me, it was, even now, if I have to use a new framework or learn a new language, like I played with Kotlin and I had to use it in production, I got the book, I read the ideas and the principles behind, and then I started coding. So I think this solid foundation in programming should be mandatory, because on that you build very easily. So let's say tomorrow Java doesn't exist anymore. Am I afraid of that? No. I can pick up another thing. It won't be easy, but still, it's the same. I was looking while I was searching while doing the presentation, what are the trends in programming languages? In the last, I was looking exactly from 2007, since I started, to last year. If you look in 2007, they were Java, JavaScript, and PHP. There were around 30%, so they were really popular. If you go further to 2013, which is 6 years, PHP almost disappears from the graph. And then you have Python. And if you look last year, Python was the first one. Java and JavaScript were close, but JavaScript, I think, second, and Java was third. So if you were to guess, you would say, okay, Python is newish or something. No. Python came in 1991. So it's the oldest of them. JavaScript, PHP, which was so cool in 2007, and JavaScript are all from 1995. So you can see it's not really relevant. Also, now we are talking about functional programming. Again, it's a cool thing. Or we are talking about reactive programming. These are all things. Functional programming came to life, let's say, as a discussion in 1930. And the first programming language, functional, was in the 50s. And now it's really cool. So if we are talking about programming, like even like mathematics, I'm sorry, but it's the fact that hardware goes so fast doesn't mean that the principle and the background of the engineering are different. They are kind of the same. So if I speak now with a 70-year-old programmer, I think we still have things in common and things to talk about. By the way, I work with a 65-year-old programmer. What I understood, and this was software development is a team sport. If you look at the movies, I think now and even if you look at Bill Gates and his first images, it was him and the computer and no one. Maybe a lot of books or something, but no one. That was back then. If you heard about the Waterfall way of working, you got like this. These were the requirements, and you had usually 2 to 4 years to implement them and just, okay, ship them. And then you will see, you will get feedback, whatever. But it doesn't work like this. Now we are talking about continuous delivery. We are talking about you implement something and in 2 minutes it can be in production. So that way of working, the lab rats, as I call them, the developers, doesn't work anymore. You have to talk to your colleagues, you have to talk to your product owner, you have to understand what you have to deliver, because everything is really quick, so the feedback loop is really short. So another thing is you have to trust your colleagues. And I was just talking in my current assignment because we had a discussion like the first discussion of the year, that even if you are senior or whatever, I don't like these titles. It doesn't matter how old you are or how well you know, you are still human. So we still have bad days. And we don't realize that. So every one of us still puts in not so good code, let's say, let's be politically correct and call it like that. So by having code reviews and by having people that you trust and you know have your back, you can relax and just, okay, I'm confident that this will work. Because if it doesn't work or I miss something, my colleagues will catch it. Software is for customers. In one of my stories, I told you that the goods management system was old and from a technical perspective, not so cool. But I understood the business of it because it was the core for it. If for them is the core, it must be important, right? So also when it comes to the development and the application deployments, everything was really complex. And why I was chosen to start a new project with my German colleague was because of my domain knowledge. So you have to know what you are building because you have to do technical compromises. There is no possibility to do software without compromises. And if you understand the context, you can take informed decisions. Also, there is something, it's called good enough software. It doesn't, what's the idea of investing 2 months to polish it and let's say have 1,000 transactions per second, if the customers just want to have 1 per second, the difference is very big. Or why, if you are doing a proof of concept and the customer doesn't know if it will work, why spend 6 months on that? Why not just try to do as quickly as possible, see if it works, and if it works, okay, improve it. But in order to understand this, you have to know what your software is going to be used for. And I think, again, it doesn't matter how much experience you have. This is domain knowledge we all have to know. And the last thing, which is not only, it doesn't matter if you're the developer or not, feedback is important. Especially now, I told you, in the Agile world, it works on feedback. So just, this is the easiest way to grow. So when you have, let's say, we all have the OKRs and the discussions, okay, what do you need to do for the next 6 months to get to the next level or to get a pay raise or whatever. If someone comes and said, okay, I think you should improve this, for me it's easier. If I have to think about it myself, that's just harder. And especially if you know the context and also the company. So yeah, it's not comfortable. It's not, at least for me. It still isn't, but I see the value of giving feedback. So these were my 4 lessons, and I want to give you the resources. These are some old books, as I told you, because the colleagues from my first company mentioned these ones. But one thing that still applies, so if you read these books, they are written by technical people, but they talk about something else. Don't take everything literally, because this guy, we call it Uncle Bob, because he's kind of the grandpa of the Java part, goes to extremes and says that, okay, besides your 40 hours of work, you should spend at least 20 hours practicing by yourself. Yeah, it happened. And it happens. If you have a new framework, again, new context, it can happen. But to make this mandatory, yeah, it didn't work for me. Pragmatic programmer also, it's a good thing. It talks also about interviews. And how interviews are both ways. So also if you go to an interview, it's important to ask questions and to see if that company is a match for you. And one thing, the essential Scrum, I put it there because I see even now we are in 2020 now, and some people think that Agile is so cool. I love Agile because I saw teams growing because of the feedback loop and everything that you do. But Agile in itself and Scrum, for me, is not a process in itself. There are some guidelines. The idea behind it, and I think one thing that the majority of people forget about the Agile manifesto is that it was written by programmers, like the geeky ones, the lab rats. Those people wrote that. So if you have people coming and talking about processes, you have to remember, no, this was written by developers, by the real ones, the ones that now are 60 plus. So this is what I talked about. I hope it was useful. These are my details if you want to contact me, and and now, if you have any questions, yeah, which one?
Hi, Karen. Thank
Hey.
you for your story. So you told about your first internship and that it was 12 interns within the group.
Yeah.
And you got the job offer after the internship. How many people got the job offer also? And why do you think you got the one?
I think it was 8 out of 12. So it was the majority. Why? I think during my internship, especially after the first month, I was all in. Like maybe I was sometimes I stayed for so long in the classroom and I had so many questions, like valid questions. When I mean valid questions, okay, first as I told you, first you Google it, you try to understand it. So you have again the context, and then if you don't understand, you ask someone. So every time, whatever I did, I tried to understand everything. And I did all my assignments, and I did them and understood them. So I think that was my advantage. And I think also that's why I was chosen to go on the cool project in London, because I was the only one from the group of 8. The other ones were put on some old projects. Yes. So I can answer this question by talking about how Waterfall was. And Waterfall, even if it's old, it's still used in some company. So there was a big distinction between, okay, product people, technical people, and then you had the testers or whatever, whoever is there. So how it worked, for at least 6 months, the business people just stayed there, wrote a ton of documentation, and said, okay, this software has to do this, 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 this. It has to look like this, 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 this. And then it just had everything, threw it to the technical people. And then those people had, like, if it was 6 months, that was luxury. But usually it was between 1 and 3 years. And after that period of time, the developer said, all is done. And we are done. That's it. And then the next team of testers or whatever they were not called testers. They just came, took the big bunch, and with the documentation, they said, okay, this works, check. This works, check. This works, check. And that was how it worked. So imagine you write some code today, and in 2 years, someone comes and says, okay, you have a bug there. What? I don't remember what was 2 years ago. So that's the way it was, and it still is in some companies. Maybe not 2 years, but 6 months. Even that is a lot, because also if you move to a new project, you don't remember what you wrote. So, and Agile means you work in sprint, usually 2 to 3 weeks. And also the business people stay really close to the team. That means that in my team, for example, now, the product owner just comes and says, okay, this is what I need you to, for example, just a real example. I want you to implement a new transfer type for the US. So banking. And okay, these are the conditions. You have to validate that. And then, first of all, you are asked, how much does it take? 1 day, 1 week, whatever. And then at the end of the period, someone comes and verifies if that works. This happens in, let's say, 1 week. So if you have a bug, it's there, you fix it, and you ship it. And the idea is you ship it directly to the client, and you see if the client actually uses it. So this is the idea. And what's important from a feedback perspective is the fact that you should have the retrospectives in which you say what went well in the last 2 weeks or 3 and what can be improved. So this is really important. And I've worked in teams. I worked in a team with really good developers and testers, but really different as personalities and with really strong opinions. The first retrospectives and the first discussions were, it looked like a fight. So, I want to do it like this. This is why we have to do it. No, it's not good. And it was, what the heck is happening? So it was really, then, because they didn't know each other, in the end, they would not, we are not friends. I was part of, we are not friends because we are so different as personalities. But the idea was we had to deliver a product and we knew that we were good technically. So by having this feedback and discussions, we actually started respecting each other and knowing if someone comes and says, okay, in my opinion, this should be done like that. And the other says, okay, no, because it was an actual discussion in which everyone respected the other's opinion and it became like a compromise. That's the difference, and that's why I say, for me, Agile was the methodology that changed this. And yeah.
Thank you, great answer. Any more questions from the audience? Okay, otherwise I also have a question. I had a question. So you mentioned that, let's say Java does somehow disappear and you need to find something else. Obviously you'll survive, right? How much of a difference do you think it makes switching from Java to another object-oriented language versus having to switch to a more functional language or aspect-oriented language?
So now I can say I'm pretty comfortable with any object-oriented language. So if I switch, it's just a matter of learning the syntax, but somehow in the principles are the same. Going to functional is the same. I worked sometime functional and I studied functional, and I think because now it's such a big thing, it's just another way of thinking and another way of organizing your software. But when it comes to, I rather switch to a functional one just because another object-oriented is too close. And it's like after 13 years, it all becomes like, it's not, I don't think sometimes when I write, okay, it's just normal, whatever I do. So I rather change drastically than choose the more comfortable path.
Fair enough, makes sense. All right, any more questions? Anyone? Awesome, do we have the books? Anna, thank you.
Earlier you mentioned having to be pragmatic sometimes and balance the desire to write perfect and pretty code versus time constraints. What I was wondering about, were you saying that first you make something work, make something function, and later on you make it able to process more transactions per minute or whatever? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. When I say, okay, just make something work, I don't mean do a mess. Because one of the things that I was learned is you write code for other developers. It's just like, you know how, I guess the doctors also here in the Netherlands, when you try to read their writing, it's just, what? So you can write the code to work and be a mess, and only you understand it at that point, because if you go back in a month or something, you won't either. So the idea is write code that it's, let's say, correct. If you read clean code, for example, you understand that, okay, it has to be readable, it has to be maintainable. That's also very important. But that's kind of the basics. You have to always write that kind of code. But when it comes to how performant it has to be, just make it good enough. Because, okay, you can put it multi-threading, executing, I don't know, asynchronous way, reactive, whatever. But first, implement it, see if it meets the client needs. Okay, go into production or whatever. And then, if it's needed, go and polish it.
That clears it up.
Thanks.
All right, any more questions? Question in the front. Thanks.
Okay, so what are you looking for when you're refactoring code?
First of all, I really love refactoring. So I'm looking, as I told you, for it to be understandable. When you see a sign that I find the code not so good is when I start actually writing the flows. For me, it's just my mind is really like I'm an engineer. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, if there is that. So everything is really clear, mathematical in my mind. But sometimes software can be so messy. Like from here, you do this, and then you do the other, and then. So when that happens, I start writing, and I see. So if I read stuff, first of all, the obvious thing is the naming. So many people don't use proper names. Come on. It's like, okay, when I started not working in university and writing everything with A, B, C, D, like the variable names, that's unacceptable. Give me something. What does it mean? Also, when you have a method or a function or whatever, it has to do one thing, and that has to be in the naming. It doesn't matter how complex things are. You can split it. You can't make it, okay, you, instead of having something like this which does 10 things, have 10 methods and then call them. That's totally different. So try to make it as clean as possible. And yeah, clean code explains what that means. And yeah, duplicate code. There is a thing I forgot. I did a presentation, but of course I didn't remember anything. There is a way of coding, it's called coding by coincidence. What does that mean? You just, either you find in your project or online or in a book or whatever, you copy the code, you adapt it to whatever you do, and it works. But you don't understand what you did. So you just leave it like that, and it works, and I'm done. This is called coding by coincidence. Why is it called like that? Because if you don't understand why it works, when something will not work, that's when you are in big trouble. So that's it. You have to understand how it works, because you will always have bugs. There is no perfect software, because we are, again, humans.
All right, thanks. Any more questions? All right. Thank you very much again, Carmen, for the great talk. One more round of applause. So even though this was the only first CodamX talk of the decade, we will have more CodamX talks every week on Wednesday. You can check online, codam.nl/CodamX, so you can see which talks are coming up and find more social links there. So thank you very much.